Today we will dive into the critical topic of good governance and the challenges of national development, exploring the pillars of effective leadership and sustainable growth. And later on the show, we will crack you up with some comedies that will lead us into the weekend proper. Yes, it's a loaded package today. Now, governance remains a key determinant of any nation's progress. At its core, good governance ensures transparency, accountability, and inclusivity, paving the way for social and economic development. But many countries continue to grapple with barriers that hinder their potential. Across the globe, nations face a shared struggle, balancing the demands of development with the challenges posed by political, economic, and social constraints. In many developing countries, issues like corruption, inadequate infrastructure, and lack of civic engagement often stifle progress. For instance, limited access to basic services like education and healthcare creates disparity that widens poverty gaps. Meanwhile, political instability undermines efforts to implement reforms effectively.
Good governance is not just about decision-making, it's about ensuring those decisions align with the aspirations of the people. Leaders must prioritize citizens' engagement, digital accountability tools, and equitable policies to address long-standing inequalities. Now, in the 21st century, nations are taking bold steps to address these challenges. For example, adopting technology in governance through e-governance platforms ensures faster delivery of public services and reduces corruption. Additionally, fostering public-private partnership has been pivotal in infrastructure development. It is clear that overcoming developmental hurdles requires a collective effort involving government, private sectors, and citizens. And to help us drive this conversation deeper on the show today is an author, playwright, human rights activist, and a politician, Senator Shehu Sani. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on the show. Well, let's start with the latest news on the proposed tax reform bills. It seems that the governors have been able to reach a middle ground, and, the bills can now sail through unhinged in the National Assembly. But they've made some recommendations, and, they're still against the increase in the VAT from 7.5% to 10%. Do you think this is light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, thank you again for having me in your program. Well, first and foremost, we know that Nigeria is a democracy, or a developing democracy. And policies and programs of government are naturally set to be tabled before the public.
Of course. For
people to give their own views and opinion on how it should be. And the beauty of democracy as it is in Nigeria, since the issue of the tax reform has become a public discourse, people have been given all sorts of views. Some views are from an expert point of view, some are political, and some are just reaction to it. And what is interesting is that for the first time, Nigerians have shown so much interest in a certain policy of government which they believe that is as important as their own lives and livelihood.
Indeed.
The Governors Forum, senators, the public, non-governmental organization have all keyed into it, giving their own views on this matter. But the fact is that, first of all, on the tax reform, most of the reactions that followed it, not all, but most of it, are mostly political. People come up to the air and also make reactions without actually even going through the bill and see what it is. When they say tax reform bill, many people don't know that there are 4 bills before the National Assembly. The Nigerian tax bill, the Nigerian tax administration bill, the Nigerian Revenue Service, and the joint revenue bill. These are the issues. But politics set in, and then there was a lot of misinformation. And the easiest way for you to misinform the public is simply to pick one or two things and then throw it to them. And what they picked was that government wants to raise taxes and that the tax bill is against a section of a country. And that became sentimental and people became so emotional about it. But now, having gone through that phase, we reach a point where the governors express concern. And being the leaders of subnationals, there is no way the president who wants to carry along everyone will have by fiat simply say pass this bill. And as a Democrat, he opened it for discourse, and I listened to his own media chat where he said he is open to discussion on the matter. Yeah. But now, the principle of all these things is that they have now endorsed this bill, and this bill is likely going to scale the rest segment of the National Assembly. So for us, as Nigerians, all the promises and the premise of this bill should simply be practicalized so that all these heat debates and conversation that took place will come to fore. Anywhere in the world, reforms are not popular. When people are going to transit from what they have been used to a new phase, there will be resistance, there will be objection, there will be criticisms. And it is never possible for any government implementing reform for it to be loved and praised and clapped that you are implementing reform. But opinions will change over time. What we are passing through today is a phase to which countries like Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brazil, Argentina have all passed through. So it is when the reform, including the tax reform, start bearing fruits that people will now say that, yes, this is worth it.
Yeah, distinguished. Good enough, the Governors Forum came out with a position, just like you've also explained. But the worry in here is the narrative from the political class. Initially, the political class pushed out a narrative that it will not benefit a section of the country and that Nigerians are meant to pay higher tax, just like you rightly explained. At what point should the people begin to lead the narrative about reforms, and not just when the political class are not comfortable, they come against it, and when they feel comfortable, they support, like it is now? Is that not a dangerous signal for us as a country that wants to grow?
You see, we are at a certain point in our country where a politician who is schemed out of power or who desperately needs power will use every tool at his disposal to get that power. And it is not new. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the president who is in this country today, has been in the forefront of opposition to removal of subsidy. But that, at that time, it was politically correct for him to do that because he needs it for his own party. Even he was not the one contesting. He needs it for his own. But when he was contesting, he admitted that he wants to remove it. But when the APC wanted power in 2015, he used that. So it's the same formula. The people, they thought how to use every tool, have now also taken to everything that will be tabled by government will be used by some certain person. But the danger of it is that you may use some things that for the sake of power, but you end up creating a lot of problems for the country, dividing the country, inciting a section of the country, and trying to destroy the country because you want power. For example now, if you look at the content of the tax reform bill, there's a section of the tax reform bill that gives tax rebate for small businesses. So how can that be bad for one part of the country? There's a section of there's a content of clause in that bill that also gives tax relief for low-income earners. So how can that be against a section of the country? There's a section of that reform bill that excluded education and agriculture from tax issues. So how can that be? There's a section of that reform bill that gives more money to subnationals as against the federal government. How can that be a section of... So if you go through, if you are going to discuss the content of the bill, you will see how progressive, how reformist, how good it is for the future of the country. But for the fact that impression in the present world is stronger than reality.
Yeah.
So once you throw something sentimental, people believe in it. They don't want to go through anything. They just say, this is what it is, and we're against it. And this is bad for us.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about the state of the nation. You put out a tweet on your X handle saying that Nigeria is still haunted by the death of Ahmadu Bello, a former prime minister of northern Nigeria. What did you mean by that, and how is that impacting Nigeria today?
Well, 1966 happened just a year before I was born. And my own study of Nigerian politics has shown that Nigeria's politics is still being dictated or being shaped by what happened in the First Republic. In the sense of the word, that the killings of those leaders led to the unfortunate crisis we found ourselves with the Civil War. And then time and time again, government after government, there have always been reference to what has happened up to today, 5 decades after. But the point for us as a country is, how do we move forward from this? And what lessons do we learn out of that? The war happened, hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and the nation has never been the same. And efforts were made by previous administration to cement the divide that exists between the section of the country. But hardly since 1966, hardly you go through Nigerian media or listen to public comment without seeing someone making reference to that. And each time the political elections come, you will see that that reference has been made. But the leaders we had at that very time, the killings of those leaders became the seed of Nigeria's political problems, in the sense that those leaders are comparatively honest, transparent, patriotic. I come from Kaduna State. I live in Kaduna State. I am from Kaduna State. Up to today, we cannot trace any mansion, any vehicle, any company, any farmland associated with the late Sardauna of Sokoto, Ahmad Bello. And what we have seen, he is the person who has signed the ministry of CFO. His ministers have houses, his personal assistants have houses, his even drivers have houses, but none of his children, none of him, never himself. So the same thing with Tafawa Balewa. And at a certain point, Tafawa Balewa, even the National Museum in Kaduna today, from history we have learned, was the house of Tafawa Balewa. He wanted to build it, he was building it to a lintel level, and then he didn't have money, so he sold it to his political party. And up to today, he's only identified with his family house. Now, that is why I'm saying that if we are talking of accountability, if we are talking of patriotism, if we are talking of commitment and dedication to the project of Nigeria, I think the leaders of the First Republic have provided us the compass.
And we owe them so much. Now, I think closely related to that also, like we were discussing my colleague and myself this morning, that, for instance, January 15 is being marked as the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. There's something notable happened on January 15, the end of the Civil War. Now, probably the younger ones might not even know that January 15 has something to do with the Civil War. You just look at it as Armed Forces Remembrance Day. Because we look at it, we come with people that will live like, we deny what has happened, reality of what has happened. Now, you just rightly pointed out our part of our history and what we must take cognizance of if we must move forward as a nation. But let me quickly take you to something similar. You're from the North. And with all these reforms and all that, I think one narrative that people have not really talked about is holding our leaders, whether they're subnational leaders, responsible. How far have they gone in developing their various states, whether you're in the North or the South, the governors, I mean. Should we just wait for the federal government? What have they done to increase their IGR? Should we wholly depend? Should it be about this VAT? What are you doing in your own domain to push things up? Should not be a narrative that will begin to push out?
Yeah, you see, I come from the northern part of Nigeria and I'm Hausa Fulani. And I listen to views from different people when it comes to the issue of the person of the president or the government and whatever. And people are right to express they're entitled to their opinion. But sometimes your opinion should be tallied along with the facts of history on the ground. I do not speak for the president or his government, but I will appeal to people. When they talk, they should have to align it with facts that are on the ground. For example, it's a painful thing when you see people making assertions that are not backed with facts. For example, the person who happens to be the president of this country today has spent most part of his political history supporting northern presidential candidates. Late General Shehu Sani, of blessed memory, was a man I spent many years in prison when Abacha took us there in Kirikiri prison. Shehu Sani's presidential ambition in the SDP was supported by the person who is the president today. That's one. Secondly, well, Babangida annulled that primaries, and then Abiola issue came, and then the June 12 saga. Secondly, when Obasanjo was a president, who is from the Southwest, the person who is the president today could have supported Obasanjo, but he aligned himself with Waziri of Adamawa, Atiku Abubakar, who happens to be his friend and still his friend. Can that person be said to be anti-North? Ribadu, who is my brother, a national security advisor today, was also thrusted to the leadership of the country, supported by the person who is the president of this country. From where Eradua, Atiku, and Ribadu, where do they come from? They come from the North. Now, the person who is the president today was pivotal and key to the victory of President Muhammadu Buhari in 2015 as against a southerner from the southern part of the country, despite all the offer and treaties given to him. And he supported him. And not just for the beginning, till the end. Not even saying, I give you one term and the second time you have to kneel down before me. It never happened. Now, with a person with this track record, I don't stop anyone from saying he is anti-North or he is working against the North. But I want you to put this into perspective and see how you can use this to justify what you are saying. I didn't stop anybody from criticizing him. Now, put that into a box, then come to the second aspect of it. The North has played the major role in the victory of Aswaju, thrust him into office. They have supported him and given him the highest vote. But now, let's look at what came after. Most of the positions key positions that were given by President Bola Tinubu to the Northerners are positions that are as important as the survival and progress and development of the region. The Minister of Agriculture is from Borno State, from the north. Minister of State for Agriculture is from Borno State, from the north. Agriculture is the backbone of northern economy. security and defense. For 1 decade and a half, the North has been besieged by terrorists and bandits. Insecurity has become the order of the day. The Minister of Defense and Minister of State for Defense are all from the North. The Chief of Defense Staff is from the North. The Minister of Foreign Affairs from the North. Health issues are more prevalent in the North than any other person. Pate, a very vast technocrat, is from Bauchi State, he is from the North. He heads that. Now, let us be sincere to ourselves. There was a time from 2015 to 2023, the Northerner, in the person of the former president, holds sway. Most of the positions of security, the security apparatus and architecture of this country were headed by the Northerners, but it has not been able to address the fundamental problem of security. Well, now you have the National Security Advisor who is from the North. Now, if you look at all these things in detail, now you'll be fair to yourselves. Does that show that someone is working against a certain region? A government you voted, it should be a government you own and a government you back for it to achieve what you want to achieve. That is my own view. And I have not stopped any person from saying that there is an anti-North agenda. But I want you to back it up with some of these facts, which I believe that's in our very interest. It's a question of time, 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, power will rotate.
Well, 2027 now, it's a major talking point. And, we are beginning to see signs of maybe an alliance or a merger between political forces. Some people have even said that the reason why some politicians have heavily criticized this government is because they have some vested interest. Do you think the Tinubu administration has done enough to, win the heart of the electorate to return him in 2027? Just quickly before we move on.
Well, you see, you cannot access the beauty of a building when it is at the phase of construction. When you are building a house, you're certainly going to see cement here, iron there, or whatever. It's when the house is complete before you know it. If you are implementing reform, people are suffering. They cannot feed their family. They cannot feed themselves. They cannot pay their school fees of their children. They can't pay their rent. If that is the very moment election is going to take place, there is no way you can win that election. But I think it is wise enough to have started these reform programs some years before the election. So when the fruit of these reforms started becoming apparent and clear and visible and available for the people, the public opinion will change against it. But for now, nobody will be convinced that they increase the price of petroleum, you cannot pay his bill for you to vote for you. But it's when the fruit comes, people will change.
Thank you so much, Senator Shehu Sani, for this thoughtful perspective from you. And that is all we can take on the interview segment.